So let's talk briefly about LLCs and why you may be in a delusional state that you're protected simply because you have an LLC. The first thing to do is let's look at what is an LLC? It's a limited liability company. Well, the question then is, how does it limit your liability? And now every state has different laws regarding the liability of you as an individual and the company, the LLC. So we really need to dive into primarily what state have you formed your LLC in. There are some states that are fantastic and they provide tremendous protection and privacy and are inexpensive and easy to run your company out of. Then there are some states that are fantastically brutal in their openness to allow the corporate veil to be lifted and the liability of the individual company owners to be ruined. And I'll state that my personal opinion is that California is one of the worst states to form an LLC in. Not only is it fantastically expensive, and to maintain it every year, the last time I checked was $800 a year. Now, they've also got some laws on the book that don't create a limited liability. They actually create increased liability versus other states. And for me, that's just I can't do it. I won't do it. What is that big problem with California? In my estimation, aside from the cost, is that you have charging orders, and the laws regarding a charging order are so anti-business owner. And what is a charging order? Let's jump into that for a minute. If you own a company and it does business in California, you might be okay. But if you're doing business outside of California, let's say you buy a property in, Illinois, and you decide, okay, my California LLC is going to own the house in Illinois, and it's the owner. And there's a problem, maybe one of the contractors cuts his finger off or electrocutes himself or something happens there, and they sue you. And they find out that it's a California LLC that owns it. And they've got a hotshot attorney that says, hey, you know what? We're going to go after not only the damages on this lawsuit, but we're going to go way bigger, and we're going to force the sale of that company in California and all of its assets to be liquidated. That's pretty brutal, if you ask me. And I don't think that's why we get involved into these limited liability companies. We want to limit the liability. So that charging order, and I'm giving a very brief, really generalized description of what can happen in a worst case scenario. That charging order can truly ruin your company. And the other side of that is that what if you've got partners in that company? Let's say it's your son or your daughter, and you've gotten into that limited liability company with them. They're a co-owner. Now they're forced to sell their interest in it too. So it's a really unusual process for people to have to go through that lawsuit and have to go through the challenges with the charging orders. Now, if you have formed your LLC in a different state, let's say you form it in Delaware, or let's say even better, I'm a fan of Wyoming. If you form it in Wyoming, charging orders in the scenario we just described, they can't come and force the sale of any of your assets. They can't force the sale of any of the company's assets. They can't do any of that because the laws about charging orders in Wyoming are significantly stronger for the business owner. Again, California, very, very, pro-lawsuit favorable in my estimation. You can do a lot of junk out there. I stay away from California LLCs with everything I have. I had to form a Georgia LLC and I was kicking and screaming. I ended up not using it because of the charging orders. And I don't want to have that vulnerability. And I don't want you to have the vulnerability that California has or that Georgia has. And there's a bunch of other states that have very difficult charging order laws on the books that allow for people to come in and force you to liquidate your entire company in order to pay off a judgment or a lien. I urge you to really dive into what state you're living in, what state your LLCs are formed in, and find out what the charging order laws are. Really go into that because most of what I talk about is kind of an insurance policy if something were to happen. You pay, how many thousands of dollars a year for your car insurance or your house insurance or maybe your boat insurance or whatever property insurances you have on your apartment buildings or, all of these insurances that we pay, maybe your jewelry. You got to think of this business asset, this structure, as the way to really increase your insurance. And if you have an LLC that's formed in one state and you need to transition from one state to another, you can do it. It's a little bit of a heavy lift, but it can get done and it can save you virtually everything in really tough situations. So I'm going to urge you again, go and check out what state you're in, the LLC and the charging order laws, because that will penetrate potentially in certain states, that will penetrate your LLC, the corporate veil. You don't want that.